Hi everyone, Sam from the Danger Planet here. Today we're going to be talking about Som'er Teeth Jones and the Big Hat keyword with their rework. So the Big Hat keyword and Som'er Teeth are some of the oldest models in the game. They date all the way back to first edition when Som'er Teeth was the only Gremlin master, and Gremlins weren't even their own faction; they were outcasts. So he's a very iconic, classic master who unfortunately has been pretty bad lately. So the keyword really just went back to the drawing board and rewrote all the Big Hat models. Some to a greater or lesser extent. So we're not going to go line by line on every change, but I want to give you a high-level overview of what's changed, how the crew plays, and what kind of tricks you can use to get ahead with them in Gaining Grounds 4. So if you don't know anything about what Big Hat does, you should have a little bit of a baseline. But basically, what they've changed mostly is their keyword ability. They used to have the Bayou Bash keyword ability, which was just not very good. It didn't function very well with the way Malifaux played in 2023. Bayou 2 card is their new keyword ability, and almost every model in the keyword has it. And Bayou 2 card models, during actions that they declare, so doesn't have to be their activation, but usually it will be. They can cheat fate with the top card of their fate deck, but if they do, they have to declare triggers. And that's significant because a lot of these models have triggers that are either situational or downright bad. So you do need to be aware of that, but it's basically a free card. You know, if you're losing a duel anyway, you might as well cheat it. It's definitely very strong. Just one thing to note is you can't use it defensively because it's during an action you declared. So that puts a little bit of a limit on it, but it's still a very, very strong ability. So we'll start with Som'er Teeth. Now, Som'er's always been the Bayou's summoner. He basically summons in, his extended family of Joneses. He's also has a pretty good gun, which we'll get to, but his summon has changed a bit. It's a little bit easier to summon models now, but you have to target an enemy. And when you summon models, you summon any number of Big Hat minions within Aura 2 of the target, which is in some ways a huge advantage. You're summoning models right into position, but in other ways it means you have to be careful because anything you summon is immediately in the line of fire. Now, there's a lot of different flavors of Gremlin, which we'll get to. But a lot of times you'll be summoning Bayou Gremlins. Rounding out that his card, he's got a pretty good gun. The Boomer has some pretty reasonable triggers. He also has Foul Mouth Motivation, which hands out focused healing, and his Foul Mouth Motivation has a little trigger to deal 2 damage to a model within 3 inches of the target, which is very strong. It's unresistible damage off a tactical action. And he has the new rule, I'm an expert shot, which is that when he fails his shooting actions targeting an enemy, a friendly Big Hat model may take 1 point of damage to make a melee attack against that enemy. So, whether you hit or miss with your gun, you're still going to get at least another shot at doing some damage. And sometimes you might want to miss. And it's pretty easy for him to shoot into melee if the models that he's shooting into are models he summoned, because when he summons a model, they gain the Drunken Stupid upgrade, which means that friendly models attack actions ignore the summoned model for friendly fire, and they gain a bonus action Break Stuff, which is just lets them remove a scheme marker and has some interesting triggers on it. So Som'er's pretty strong. He's a tough summoner. He's got a built-in squeal trigger, so he'll push away if the enemy attacks his defense. But mostly he's just there to take boomer shots and summon gremlins into the enemy's face and kind of force them to deal with them. So he's a lot of fun. Now, Gremlin General Lenny Jones is Som'er's son and his henchmen, and I think we need to talk about them kind of together, because Lenny's kind of the other half of the equation. Lenny is a big, beefy melee beater. He's gotten a lot more killy in this version of the crew with the shove aside trigger added to his melee attack, and given an increased stat and flurry. So he has Grit Frantic, so he can do some serious damage. But the big sort of buff ability he enables is Gremlin General, which is that when a model within Aura 8 of him uses the Bayou 2 card ability to cheat, they can add a mask to their final duel total, which means if you're forced to declare a trigger, you can at least be forced to declare a mask trigger, which is pretty strong. Some of the really bad triggers that you super don't want to hit are not mask triggers, so you'll at least have the opportunity to pick something else. And of course, you've also got some useful mask triggers that you actively want to hit. So Lenny's pretty good, but you'll see him, I think, a lot next to Som'er just because he's there to kind of make your Bayou 2 card function a little bit more smoothly, and he's a melee beater. Now, the other model you really need to talk about is the Bayou Gremlin. Now, these guys are terrible at everything. They suck. They're incredibly easy to kill. Their attack actions are awful, but they have a new demise ability, which I think is worth discussing a little bit. It's demise cannon fodder. It basically is demise, draw a card, but if this model has not yet started its activation, the enemy has to discard a pass token. And this is huge because one of the real problems with running a horde list in Malifaux is that you give up activation control because your horde models are so easy to kill. And that's really bad. Getting last activation is very important for scoring in this game. So the fact that you can summon a bunch of Bayou Gremlins who admittedly suck at everything and are very easy to kill, but you can have them take away the pass token that they generate when they die, or on subsequent turns they just take away the pass token that your opponent gets for you outnumbering them so much. That really gets rid of the big downside of swarming and going wide. And I think that something like that was essential in order to make a horde playstyle viable. Now, Bayou Gremlins are pretty bad at everything, but that's not true of all of the minions. And Som'er's title form has some pretty interesting twists here. He has specifically a bonus action to target a Bayou Gremlin and replace it with one of the big hat minions that has the demise I'm done with this ability, which is a demise that turns you back into a Bayou Gremlin. Basically, these are special gremlins who are getting promoted to special jobs. So some of these minions are actually really powerful, but they're all pretty situationally useful. So sometimes taking Bayou Gremlins is useful to just upgrade them into real minions. And Som'er Teeth Lootmonger, his title, can also summon a lot of Bayou Gremlins because whenever a friendly model with an Aura 10 removes a scheme marker, they can discard a card to summon a Bayou Gremlin or a Skeeter. So both Som'ers are really trying to summon Bayou Gremlins and some of the tougher gremlin minions as well, but they do it a little differently. Regular Som'er puts them into melee with the enemy. Som'er Teeth Jones summons them when you remove scheme markers and then upgrades them. And of course, the original Som'er's got more of a ranged focus, and Title Som'er has a pretty nasty melee attack. It can do quite a lot of damage. The other big theme that this crew has is scheme markers. There's a lot of different models in this crew that have the ability to remove scheme markers for various value actions. Som'er Teeth, his title version has the Gremlin Raid ability, where you can push a model towards a scheme marker and then remove it to gain focused. And he has that ability, like I said, to summon Bayou Gremlins when you remove scheme markers. A lot of models either have Break Stuff, the bonus to remove a scheme marker, on their card, or they have it as an upgrade, because if you summon a model with Som'er Teeth Jones 1, or you upgrade a model with Som'er Teeth Jones 2, you get the upgrade that gives you Break Stuff. So you're really going to be very good at removing enemy scheme markers, and that's a major strength of this crew. Removing enemy scheme markers, even the totem, the Skeeters, they're insignificant, which makes you think you wouldn't really be able to do anything with scheme markers, but they actually have a bonus action to target an enemy scheme marker, remove it, and get a fresh Skeeter or Bayou Gremlin. And they have the ability to target a friendly Bayou Gremlin, kill it, and get a scheme marker. So Skeeters are very useful because they can turn Bayou Gremlins into scheme markers and back and forth. They're also very fast at movement 6 and flying, so even though they're insignificant, you have some really powerful scheming potential. Now, besides Lenny, there's a couple of other models in this keyword that are worth noting. Georgie and Olaf, pretty standard enforcer. They've changed very little between the two editions, although they now have the Break Stuff ability built in. They have a pretty good gun, a reasonable melee attack, and are just generally an all-around fairly beefy and somewhat durable enforcer. But Old Cranky is really key to how the crew plays. Now, Old Cranky is pretty fragile. He's only defense 4 and with 5 health and hard to wound, but he has an ability that is really a linchpin for the keyword. You can handle it, Sonny. Now, that means whenever a friendly big hat model within 8 inches, and that's not even aura 8 inches, is targeted by an enemy attack action, Cranky can discard a card to make that attack instead hit a big hat minion of cost 3 or less, which is a Skeeter or Bayou Gremlin. And the only requirement is that model, the Skeeter or Bayou Gremlin, is within 4 inches of the target and line of sight. And notice, if they kill a Bayou Gremlin, you draw a card from the cannon fodder trigger. Skeeters have that trigger too. So yes, it technically costs you a card, but almost anything that hits a Gremlin or Skeeter is going to kill it because they only have 2 health. And if they die, you just get the card back. As long as you can keep Bayou Gremlins and Skeeters near your models, you can just basically, have an infinite supply of them. Um, Original Som'er can summon Bayou Gremlins and Skeeters, and of course, Title Som'er can summon Bayou Gremlins and Skeeters by having or just Bayou Gremlins rather, by having your models remove scheme markers. So as long as you're keeping that churn, that throughput of summoning, you can just throw all the attacks your opponent's making onto Bayou Gremlins and have your really important, valuable models survive. Cranky's really good, maybe even too good. So we're gonna have to watch out for that and maybe see if he gets a little bit of an adjustment. But for now, he's just a very key model for keeping your crew safe. You just got to make sure that your models are within 8 inches of him and they all have little bodyguard gremlins near them. So we've talked about a lot about the named models, but there's also a few minions to think about. You got good old boys. They're pretty basic combat minion. They've got a reasonable gun and a pretty good melee attack. I'd say their melee attack is really what you're taking them for. They also have swagger, so when they walk, they gain focused if they're not already. And they also have a bonus action that gives them a positive twist to defense flips for models engaging them, so you really want them in melee. Just something to note about them is they have the cannon fodder demise, which means Som'er 1 can summon them because they're big hat minions, but Som'er 2 cannot upgrade Bayou Gremlins into them, so you really want to hire them in Som'er 2. Beyond the combat minions, you've got a few different types of support minion. Gremlin Criers have Obey. They have Sharp Wit, which slows the target, and they have this really interesting bonus action, a New Declaration, which lets you push a friendly big hat model 2 inches, and then has 3 different triggers that each resolve an effect but kill the minion you pushed. So you can drop a scheme marker, you can pulse out some damage, you can hand out focus and shielded. But it costs you the life of a gremlin. So I really like the Criers. They have a really fun kind of ability to use these Bayou Gremlins you're summoning as more than just, pure cannon fodder. You can actually kind of get effects from them. The Criers also have Bully, so when they're targeting a model with lower cost than themselves, so cost 6 or less, they can build in a suit, which is important because their Obey does not have the built-in mask that you need. But they're very fragile. So all they've got is manipulative, 5/5 defensive stats, and 6 health. If anything hits them, they will die. So you really do have to keep them safe, with old Cranky or keeping them out of line of sight. Spit Hogs are healers. They can, heal friendly models with their Smack with a Roasted Pig action. They have an AoE heal called Foods Up that can even end conditions on friendly models. And they've got an interesting ability called Roadkill Cafe, which lets you treat corpse markers within 8 inches as friendly scheme markers. And this is useful because when you lose a Bayou Gremlin, it turns into a corpse, and you're going to have a lot of Bayou Gremlin corpses lying around. Finally, we've got Banjonistas. Banjonistas are these very cool support models. Banjonistas are pretty powerful. They can hand out shielded. They're situationally strong because they are very fragile, although they're cheap. But the key thing that they do that's really, really strong is the right tune. Now, it costs an 8 or more. This is a tactical action that needs an 8 or more. So it's a real card. But you pick a model that with the big hat keyword within 4 inches of them, and that model can ignore armor, hard to wound, or hard to kill. You choose one at the time you use the ability. So for the rest of the turn, they can choose to ignore that defensive tech. If they do, they can't declare triggers. But ignoring armor is very strong in any keyword, and Bayou has historically kind of struggled a bit with armor, and having just this really good ability to put armor piercing on a model, very, very strong. Now the right tune is also once per turn, but multiple Banjonistas can use it on the same target. So if your opponent has like a Peacekeeper, you can put ignoring armor and ignoring hard to wound on one of your gunner models, like Georgian Olaf or maybe even Som'er himself, and then he can just blast that Peacekeeper right off the table. They also have Biting Insult, which is a short-range attack that if it hits and the enemy has not activated yet, you get a pass token, which I feel like I should mention because we all know pass tokens are very, very strong, although this is a stat 5, so it's a little bit hard to make it happen. The last model in the keyword is the White Rabbit Co. This is also a Red Chapel model. It's actually a Resurrectionist, and you can use it in Big Hat. Now, the White Rabbit Co. hands out hats with its tailored fit ability. A hat upgrade is an upgrade that one of your models can wear that can either be discarded to reduce attack damage by 2 to a minimum of 0, so you can no-sell an attack with it, But while it's on your head, that model is treated as a scheme marker, which is very strong for scoring certain schemes, like the ones that require you to be in the corner of the table, like Power Ritual, for example. They also have Beckoning Call, which is kind of like a better version of Lure. You move the target, its movement, towards any friendly model in its line of sight. So you can either pull a model towards you, or you can target another friendly and push them up the table. These guys are very, very strong. They've also got Chatty, which is good because this is a very interaction-heavy GG, and forcing enemies to discard cards to take the interact action is pretty strong. They're manipulative, but they are a bit fragile, with only 7 health, 5/5 defensive stats, and no other defensive tech except for Innocent Bystander. So again, you're going to want to keep a Bayou Gremlin stapled to them to no-sell the attacks. So putting it all together, how does this crew play? Well, it really wants to have scheme markers on the board, which it can then remove for value. Almost every model has some interaction with scheme markers. Som'er 1 doesn't care about them that much. Som'er 2 cares about them a lot. But anyone with break stuff really wants to have scheme markers around. And you can even be a scheme marker. So if in a pinch, if you need a scheme marker, you can have one of your models wear a hat and step it up. It's a very, very strong keyword in pools with a lot of scheme marker schemes, because you can just remove markers very easily. You can place them very easily. You have a lot of ability to interact. So that's definitely a situation where I'd think about taking Big Hat. In general, I think they're very strong with the schemes that require you to take interact actions. That would be Cloak and Dagger, Stuff the Ballots, and to an extent Plant Explosives. Not as much at the standing or in one place scheme like raid the vaults, but whenever you need to interact, the fact that the crew has it has obeys, you have the ability to drop scheme markers with bonus actions or pick them up. You can really use your AP to go a long way. And they have some really fun tech when it comes to removing scheme markers or placing them. For example, you've got Bayou Smugglers, are a versatile model that has drag behind, which means when you move them, you can pick a model or a marker within 2 inches and basically bring the marker with them. Now, if one of your models is wearing a hat, that model's a marker and can go with the bandit, the smuggler. So if Lenny is wearing a hat and he tosses a smuggler, he pushes the smuggler 10 inches, and then he gets to teleport up to be in base contact with him, which is really funny. I'm definitely going to try that out to get a surprise Lenny in someone's face. Then charge him, do a flurry, to stat 6, to a 3, 4, 5 attacks, maybe with shove aside. He's got some pretty good game. The times when I maybe wouldn't take them is when the scheme pool is very, very killy. They're very, very fragile. You are really reliant on Old Cranky's aura. Now, that aura is very strong. Like I said, maybe too strong. So as long as you are careful and you're keeping Big Hat minions near your models, you should be able to basically keep your models safe indefinitely. However, because Som'er 1 can only summon Bayou Gremlins near enemies, if your opponent has a gun line, they don't have to get close to you. So you'll be summoning Bayou Gremlins in their face, but then they'll just, kill the Bayou Gremlins or get away from them and then shoot you. And your models, have a couple ablative Bayou Gremlins that you hired maybe, but once they're gone, you're very vulnerable. So that's something you really need to keep in mind when you're playing as this crew. You need to have Cranky safe, and you need to keep your models that matter in Cranky's aura. If you don't do that, your models will melt very quickly. In general, I think Bayou is really well positioned for GG4, just because Bayou has a lot of marker removal, and GG4 is a very scheme marker heavy GG. And I think really the Big Hat keyword is extremely well positioned and is kind of the exemplar of the Bayou's strengths. Your opponent just cannot safely drop scheme markers basically anywhere while you've got Big Hat on the board. And they can kill you, they can trade shots with you, but while they're doing that, you are running around, you're stuffing ballots, you're dropping scheme markers, you're getting intel tokens, explosives. You're really doing all the stuff you need to do to win the game. So that's how I think you really want to focus on playing is, engage people to the extent that you need to, and certainly don't skimp on using your, Lenny's powerful whack and stick, Som'er's powerful gun, maybe Georgine Olaf's gun, but focus on playing the mission and focus on keeping your models safe, because your opponent's going to kill a ton of Bayou Gremlins, but that's what they're for. And as long as your opponent has to waste AP killing Bayou Gremlins, either because you summoned them into melee or because you're passing attacks off onto Bayou Gremlins, that's AP they're spending that isn't either advancing the mission or killing your valuable models. So get used to your Bayou Gremlins being thrown under the bus. That's what this crew does. I'm kind of looking forward to playing the new Big Hat. I've never been the hugest fan of this keyword in terms of its aesthetics and lore, but I think I'd give it a try now at least. There's some kind of really fun gameplay loops, like summoning Bayou Gremlins and then having your Gremlin criers push them around and blow them up. I've always liked that kind of thing. I think it's a lot of fun. But in general, I think Big Hat is really finally coming into its own after, years of kind of languishing at the bottom of the barrel. And it's nice to see that they're getting a little bit of time in the sun. And I really like the way that they've did this whole rework. And I'm hoping that this means they're looking at some other underperforming keywords and thinking about reworking them as well. I know I've got some ideas if anyone asks me, but that's for another video, I suppose. So if you play Big Hat, if you're excited for the rework, or if you are someone who's thinking about picking up Big Hat now that they've been reworked, please let us know in the comments. Give this video a like and subscribe to Danger Planet for more great Malifaux content. And until next time, thanks for stopping by the Danger Planet.